So I recently finished playing Battlefield Bad Company on the PS3. I've played a number of the Battlefield games, but it's mainly been the games that came after Bad Company 2. I never played Bad Company 1, and my friend Declan, who's been brought up on the channel before, he's also in a podcast, check that out. He recommended this to me, so I thought I would give it a try. And my thoughts on Bad Company are somewhat of a mixed bag. Overall, I don't think the game is particularly bad or particularly great, but it's good enough as a military shooter. I have a lot of technical gripes with the game, which I'll get into in a bit. I'll start with the good things that I liked about it. Number one, the destruction in the game. Battlefield's always been known for their destructible environments. They've somewhat gotten a little bit less destructible as the games have gone on, but this game is very destructible. You'll be blowing up buildings, walls, pretty much anything can come down. It's cool to see that the destruction is so much of a staple of this game. Another thing I really like is the writing and the cast. It might be somewhat of a weird thing to bring up in a game review, but I think the characters are really likable and they're really funny in this instance. This game has a very different kind of story. It's not your typical military shooter where you go liberate some group or pulling mission objectives. I mean, you are doing that, but this is Bad Company. These are some of the worst crooks imaginable that get shoved into this company. It makes for some really interesting moments when you have this group of bad characters interacting with each other. I really liked the interactions that the two people that aren't the commander and your character have. They were really funny, they serve as comedic relief, and it genuinely made me laugh on a couple of occasions. And like I had said, the story is not your typical military shooter story. The story actually involves Bad Company going around trying to steal gold from a private military group. So if that's of any interest to you, then I would suggest just playing the game for yourself and seeing what kind of mischief comes out, because it's definitely the more unique Battlefield game that I've played in recent memory. The tone of the game is just really unique. From the music choice, from the characters and the writing, everything just sort of blends together in a very unique military shooter. I mean, it seems stupid to say, but it's not like any other FPS campaign that I've played. It's pretty fun. And it doesn't take itself too seriously. Sure, there's a lot of like military moments and stuff, but this is definitely more of like an Inglourious Basterds sort of war game. The characters aren't really being super serious about their things. They're having a lot of fun in this, and it makes me want to go back and play Bad Company 2, which I haven't played in years, and it really makes me want to see if they actually are going to develop a Bad Company 3. But as I said before, I do have a lot of technical gripes with this game. First and most noticeably is the field of view. Typically, I'm not really a field of view snob. I think it's kind of weird when people like harp on it so much. But this game feels so squished up against the camera. Whenever you're controlling, it feels like the gun is like coming out of your forehead and everything just feels like it's right in front of your face with no depth. And it looks really weird, and it's not really an issue that I've seen in other first-person shooters of the time. Just really this one sticks out. It looks particularly bad. The controls are wonky as hell. This is my other big gripe with the game. We've definitely come a long way in standardizing first-person shooter control schemes, but for driving vehicles, your L1 or left bumper on a 360 controller is accelerate, and L2 is reverse. Triangle button is the knife button. Whenever you're going to heal, there's no regenerating health, but you have to cycle through to a syringe and hit yourself with it in order to get health back, and that's really weird. You have to cycle back to your weapon too. It's no like quick switching. And switching those items are done with the triggers. Like, it's just really weird. And it was constantly messing me up while I was playing. It was too big of a departure for me to adapt to my brain. I was just constantly fumbling on the controller throughout the entire game. It's just really weird, so know that going in. And also, the controls aren't remappable. This is, I guess, made just early enough before a lot of console games were giving you those abilities, so you're pretty much stuck with that control scheme for the entire game. The sensitivity in the game is also really jerky. The animation just doesn't flow very well. I started off the game by turning it down very low, and then over time I increased it a little bit more, but throughout the game you're always just snapping around and it feels really disjointed and doesn't feel right for a first-person shooter. Everything just feels really stiff, which may be due to the age of the game, but like I had said before, there's so many other first-person shooters I've played from the same time frame that this came out where that's not really an issue, so I'm thinking that it's just poorly designed. The game looks decent. It isn't very colorful, which is sort of a gripe that I have with some games, but it's not really a negative. It's more of an artistic choice, and I can see that. The actual visual fidelity of the game isn't too bad. The one thing I will say, there's a heavy amount of grain used in the cutscenes and also the gameplay, and it's very noticeable. If you like grain or don't like grain, I mean, that's up to the person. I'm neither here nor there on it, but it's just really noticeable in this game. They just cranked up the grain and it looks a little fuzzy to me. And also one other thing that's more minor is just I think the screen shakes a little bit too much while you're walking. It's immediately noticeable as soon as you start moving, but you just kind of bob around a lot like this. Caused my head to hurt a little bit at the very beginning. I grew past that, so it was fine, but it was a lot of just the rigidity, I think, is a theme over all of these gripes that I have. It's just a little rigid. It just isn't animated that great for what you would come to expect out of a first-person shooter, or even a first-person game in general. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Battlefield Bad Company. If you enjoyed, maybe leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. Have a whole bunch of backlog reviews, and yeah, if you're interested, I'd say Bad Company's probably worth it if you can get it cheap. I got it for a couple of bucks, I think. It's worth a playthrough. Just know that there's a lot of technical issues and a lot of old dust that needs to be worked through based on when this game came out.